Welcome to Stand Up for Doctors. I'm your host, Kim Downey. Thank you very much for joining us. Today, I'd like to welcome Dr. Donna Corriel. Thanks for joining us today, Donna.
Thank you so much for having me on.
I'm very excited about our conversation already.
Same.
So I usually start by saying how we met. So I know that we were connected on LinkedIn by last June, and I think I connected with you and then found out about SoMe Docs that way. It's kind of a chicken or the egg, I'm not sure, but I think I met you and then found out about SoMe Docs through you. And I received your newsletter, which I really enjoy. And I've quoted you in an article and I've tagged you in some posts and I gave you a shout out for your book, which we'll get a little bit into later. And by way of more formally introducing you, you're a physician turned digital consultant and entrepreneur, realizing early on that physicians could make a significant difference by leveraging the untapped medium of social media. You built a platform called SoMe Docs that could help. The ultimate goal of this startup is to promote autonomy for doctors everywhere. Today, SoMe Docs, short for Doctors on Social Media, has grown to over 40,000 plus followers across social media. That's incredible.
Thank you.
Yeah, and you describe it like Amazon, but for health, with an active marketplace and magazine at its hub at doctorsonsocialmedia.com. So
Absolutely. Here,
yeah,
here.
yeah, it's great. Well, we'll talk a lot about it.
Awesome.
So today we'll be talking about, first I did want to talk about the book that you co-edited with Dr. Kimberly Green Leibowitz, What We Bring to the Practice of Medicine, and specifically your entry titled The Twist of the Patient Apology. And we'll talk about SoMe Docs and all that it has to offer physicians. So
Amazing. I can't wait.
yeah. So as we start, what would you like our audience most to know about you?
About me, probably that I am, you know, a human just like them who has been curious for most of my life, curious about humans, curious about interactions and communication. That I've learned as I grow older the importance of networking and the importance of really utilizing the tools that are available to us today, the tools of the online world to really connect with others and realizing that we can actually change healthcare through utilizing these tools in really clever, out of the box ways.
Hmm. I love that. And I just love all of your out of the box thinking. It seems like you're always doing something new. I'm just always impressed. I'm like, oh my gosh, now you thought of this. Now you thought of that. So I think that's really amazing.
Right. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So I did want to start to make sure we have time to talk about it. Is your book, What We Bring to the Practice of Medicine. So I know you came here last September to promote it. You came out to the Westchester area, but I was on vacation, so I didn't get to see you. So
Yeah,
I'm disappointed about that, but I hope it went well.
it did. Yeah, we went to a medical school and we spoke to the students. It was wonderful.
Oh, okay, that's terrific.
Yeah.
So your entry in your book was it's called The Twist of the Patient Apology. And unless you have it handy, I thought I could read the first paragraph. You could read it yourself if you had it handy, but if you don't, okay. Well, I
Yeah,
thought
I don't. You could do it.
oh, okay, all right. So you're such a good writer because you start, the knife went in sharp right between the ribs. It then twisted on its axis and slid right out, glistening in the bright lights of the examination room's overhead lighting. I didn't want it to end this way, but it had. And there I was, wounded, clutching my stethoscope in one hand, fumbling for the doorknob with the other, searching blindly for my escape route. Looking for the right words of closure, I made a polite and swift gesture at the door and left. Just like that, it ended, and I found myself leaning against the closed exam room door that separated us and letting out air I had been holding inside my punctured lungs. I had been metaphorically stabbed. That's like so powerful, right? And then I'll read one more sentence. Such is the story of many physicians like me. They are wounded by the patients they wish to treat. And before I ask you a question, just to Jill, is there anything you want to say to speak to that? Because this was very, very powerful, I thought.
I think that it really speaks to the human nature of doctors that we sometimes forget when we are patients ourselves, which I am too. I'm a patient as much as I'm a doctor, especially as I get older, and I need medical care myself. And sometimes we don't put ourselves in the shoes of the doctor and remind ourselves that they're human. And so that was just my sort of intimate and personal share of one particular experience with a patient that was really, I'm not sure that the word would be difficult. I don't think that that would be fair, but basically an unpleasant interaction with a patient that really hurt me because I was trying to help. And you know, the beautiful way that it ended up ending
Mm.
when we became, you know, not friends, obviously, but we
Right.
got
Yeah.
into a patient-physician relationship that was healthy after that, you know, after the stabbing.
Yeah, so it's a beautiful story, so that's a good reason to get the book so you can see how it ends. Right? The details.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I could relate as a, as a physical therapist myself, right? I could, think of one time that was painful for me as well, and it was most of my work was with pediatrics, and it was a little girl, the one that comes to mind, who was not doing well at all, and it turns out like she had a significant genetic problem, and I shared with the pediatric neurologist what I thought was going on with this child. And then the pediatric neurologist ended up discussing it with the mom, and she ended up being diagnosed with something very severe. But it was almost like the mom blamed me. Like if I didn't know, because the neurologist said to the mom, well, Kim is seeing this and that, and whatever, and it's like, but that was really raw, with her. And I don't know. But it was very, very painful, because then she kind of wasn't how she yelled at me the next time she saw me, because I was seeing these things, with her child that she didn't want to see. So I've
Right.
I've been there myself, and it's very
Yeah,
big, because all you want to do is help, right? You show up every
totally.
day, and all you want to do is help, and it's painful. And it also brings to mind, I recently interviewed Dr. Brittany Lamb. She's
Yeah.
the ER doctor in Virginia, and she'll talk about how sometimes like she goes to work not knowing she's making a difference. And on one end, you could think, well, how could you not think you're making a difference? You're literally saving lives every day. You're an ER doctor. But she talked about the negativity bias of the brain. And then there's those patients that you can't help, or they don't like what you won't do or can't do for them. And it's those things that eat away with you. And so sadly, she said it's rare that she saves somebody's life and they come back and say, thank you for saving my life.
That's so nice. Right. Those closures are so nice. And again, I think that it's a field where you get to do so much good, but I think that we're so overloaded right now in healthcare that we're getting a lot of these feelings of, am I enough? You know, what am I doing here? There's a lot that's snuck up middleman wise that
Mhm.
stifles us and our ability really to heal as best we can. So there's a lot of issues going on in healthcare, and that's really behind why I created the venture that I have. So
Right. And the doctors and patients are frustrated, but patients don't seem to realize that in many ways doctors are as much victims of, what's happening as they are, and that they don't have control of a lot of things. But one last thing to this that I wanted to speak to is you said that this interaction got me thinking about patient apologies. Surprisingly, little has been written about them, although I found a plethora of articles on physicians apologizing to patients. It made me wonder if we're held to higher standards because of the nature of our profession. So I tried Googling it myself, and you were right. Like, you can't really find much information about patients apologizing to doctors.
and again, it's such a small part of the whole healthcare experience. It really just represents a story and an interesting, you know, point to make, because there's plenty of times when patients themselves get upset and get hurt and feel unlistened to. And so I totally want to give that attention as well. This was just part of a compilation of stories where the doctors sort of open up and explain things and kind of share anecdotes from their own lives. So
Mhm.
again, those two, the doctor and the patient, are so important in that interaction. And I think that that's what's lacking in healthcare today, is just that intimacy of those two, because so many middlemen have crept up in between them. And I'm really trying hard to really promote autonomy through SoMe Docs for both the doctor on one side and then indirectly for the patient on the other, so we can bring them closer together.
Well, and that is critical, and it's all about the doctor-patient relationship. I agree 100%. And then the doctors that are doing it really well, I worry at what cost to them, like some of my own doctors, right? Because they're the ones who, they're not sitting with the EMR in the room,
Right.
and they're totally, but then they're spending 3 or 4 hours charting at night.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not what it used to be before. We have so much responsibility that is more than just taking care of the patient. And it really messes the beauty and the magic of healthcare, right? It used to be that someone comes in, they get treated, and that's it. They leave. Now it's so complex. It's so complex. A whole visit, everything that takes place there, from when the patient first comes in and the incredible amount of paperwork that they have to fill out, to having to ask questions that are completely irrelevant to the visit, to doing things to just check the box, and to CYA, to cover your butt, I'll
Yep,
say, instead of
yep.
a bad word. And there's just so much in the legalities and the insurance companies and having to call for prior auths, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. And as somebody who was working in the healthcare system and a patient myself, I fully understand it from all perspectives. So I guess to wind down this part of the conversation, just making patients aware of both apologizing when there's something that you could apologize for, that could really go a long way.
I
And
think apologies in general are
right.
really wonderful things. And again, I teach it to my children. I will apologize to them if I was inappropriate, and they will apologize to me if they're inappropriate. And apologies are really nice ways to kind of reconnect and start from square one.
Right. And then on the other side of that, also gratitude, that it's just so critical and that means so much to doctors that are struggling right now. So if you're grateful to any doctors, and the end of this month is Doctors Day, right? March 30th. So reach out to any doctors and show your gratitude.
That's right. Do you mind just 1 second? This will actually be funny. The thing that I grab a tissue and I blow my nose.
Go right ahead.
Okay,
Stop,
perfect. And those
stop the
listening,
recording.
oh, okay. So I just want to let everyone know that I am getting over a cold. And so that's why I'm nasally, and you'll see me with tissues, and hopefully I'll be blowing my nose outside of recording.
So I give you a lot of credit for getting dressed and showing up with your best self when you aren't feeling like your best self today. So because we
Thank
booked
you.
this a long time ago, I feel
We
like,
did.
right? So
Exactly. We did.
yeah,
Totally.
so thank you very much. So if we want to
Sure.
move on to some of the things, why don't you just tell us about SoMe? So there's going to be some people listening who haven't even heard of SoMe Docs yet. So why don't you go ahead and tell us about it?
Right. So thank you. And SoMe Docs, it stands for Doctors on Social Media. And the website is Healthcare Innovation Hub. It's at doctorsonsocialmedia.com. And it basically is a media site, and it showcases all kinds of content. It has 3 arms. It showcases content, it showcases directories, and it showcases a learn arm that consists of lectures and events. We host a lot of virtual conferences now, starting in 2024, that are chaired by professionals, by at least one physician each. We've got speaker lineups that are coming. We have a directory that is free to use of doctors that I know that you have mentioned on LinkedIn that you've used. But the really amazing part is that it's freely accessible to the public, so that the public knows that these are verified doctors that they can connect with for their projects, for their, whatever they need. For if you have a startup, if you are a journalist or a podcaster, if you're an event organizer, you can quickly link up with a verified doctor and get an actual expert for your project. And then in 2024, we're also opening a student section because we want to take it one step further and we want to facilitate networking between doctors and students. No matter where you are geographically in the States, there could be so much that we can do by connecting these two. And so I'm really excited. That's the gist of what we're building.
That's fantastic. I can't recall if there's anybody, do you have international physicians on? Because you just said American doctors, so I can't recall. Are there international physicians on it or?
Yeah, there absolutely are. So the difference is that the directory, there's basically levels of membership for the doctors themselves to get involved. There's a baseline membership that's called a profile membership, and it's free to US practicing doctors with NPI numbers. So there are international doctors that get involved. They just have to do it on a paid membership subscription. But there's plenty of them also that come in by being speakers, by pitching lectures as speakers of our virtual conferences. So this is about healthcare no matter where you are geographically. It's just that it has to sort of fit in with the model that I put in place so that it's relatively easy to verify those that are coming in and interacting.
Can you do that personally? Like,
So I have done it personally for many years, and now I'm starting to expand and have a team. And
oh,
we
okay.
are, yeah, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. I do the website myself. I built it, I run it, and
Mm,
all the social media platforms. But again, the bigger we get, the more we
mhm.
have to expand out and bring on a team to help
Sure.
us to really make this amazing.
Yeah, well, that's exciting that you need a team, that it's grown to the degree that you need a team. So that's terrific.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
been amazing.
So if we talked specifically about some of the things you've already mentioned, so the directory. So I was never on Michael. Dr. Michael Hirsch was my first connection on LinkedIn, because he was coaching me, and I asked him if it was like a helpful platform, and he was just finding it. So he was kind of new there himself. So he was my first connection, and then it just kind of snowballed from there. But I do believe early on that somehow, I connected with you, which I don't know exactly how, and that maybe he was already, maybe it was kind of through him, right? Maybe the two of you were already connected. I don't know. But anyway, once I found So Many Docs and I went to the site and looked it up, I did. I think it's a beautiful site, and each doctor is really spotlighted so beautifully. And I used that directory early on to reach out to some connections. And
Great.
then it helped too, because once you share connections, and then when you reach out to a doctor and you say, oh, we share some mutual connections, right? Then I think they're more likely to connect with you than if you're some random person. So
Right.
I could even say who we know, oh, we're both connected. And that was exciting to see those connections expand. And I have to say that every so often, I think there's some doctors in the directory who aren't very active on LinkedIn, like at all, because
Exactly.
months later, I think even as recently within the last month, maybe somebody like just now accepted my request, because I think I really used that like last June, when I reached out to some people.
Right.
So they might not have been on LinkedIn since like last June. And and then I saw my message to them that said, I found you on So Many Docs.
Well, one of the cruxes of this is that there's all these experts everywhere. And social media, while it connects us so beautifully and so quickly, is a bit overwhelming. There's
Mm,
so many platforms in which we connect that what you have is sort of like piecemeal presence where a doctor will maybe have a Facebook profile but isn't on LinkedIn. Another one
mhm.
has
Sure.
LinkedIn profile but not really on Instagram or YouTube. Another
Right.
one does YouTube but doesn't do any of the other social media platforms. So
Right.
my platform sort of makes it easier to find the doctors of today
Mhm.
transparently because everything has the degrees up front and
Mhm.
center, but it organizes it really neatly, almost like a library, and it
Mhm.
allows you to connect with the doctor no matter what platform they're on, right? Because
Right.
the beauty is that you are, making this fantastic show and then promoting it on LinkedIn, but the
Mhm.
person may not be on LinkedIn, right? And
Right.
that's the beauty of what I'm building is that I am promoting doctors and shows
Mhm.
and podcasts and series in all of the platforms and on the site so that you don't have to be in that platform
Mhm.
to necessarily grow.
Right,
So
right. No, that's great. And an example we could share exactly what you're speaking to is unfortunately Dr. Bryce Bowers. I think somebody hacked his LinkedIn or something like
yes,
that,
I
and he has
saw.
not been able to resolve that at all. So we did like a pod, we've done a couple podcasts together, and I tried to tag him, and I can't because he's not on there, but I believe, but he is on SoMe Docs, right? So that's one
Right.
of the places. And then if people go there and find him on SoMe Docs, then they could see the link to his Badge of Burnout, his website, and his podcast.
And that's exactly the point of what I built, right? So
Mm,
all these social media platforms are amazing. LinkedIn happens to be my favorite social media platform, but if it were to, for whatever reason, not exist tomorrow, or if you were to be locked out,
mhm.
even earlier today, Facebook and Instagram had a whole blackout and they weren't working.
I read that.
Exactly. And so at the end of the day, you can still find Bryce Bowers on SoMe Docs and still
Mhm,
connect with him, regardless if he's locked out of Instagram or not.
mhm,
We want to just be sure that we are reachable somewhere.
mhm,
And
mhm,
I always recommend to every doctor that I meet, you have to first and foremost, ideally have your own website. But
mhm.
after that, you have to really uh, market yourself and make sure that you're present on all, if possible, social media platforms, or at least in places where you're seen and it's easy to connect with you, etc.
Yeah, no, that's very good advice, and I'm going to ask you for a little more advice in a minute, but I also wanted to speak to, I love the fact that you said you're opening a student section of SoMe Docs, and because the more and more I get involved in this space, it's so important for all of this stuff to start for medical students, right? Everything from learning about, like trauma and shame and bullying, right? And burnout and moral injury, is that these things are happening earlier and earlier, and even more so now with like residents or med students, that they're burnt out when they still have years to go before they're even in attending. So just to see, I'm going to have you speak to that, is just all the benefits for students.
Yeah, exactly. I think that what's really beautiful about the world of social media is that hyper connectivity. You can connect with somebody that's doing similar things or that you can collab with, and they don't have to be in your medical school. They don't have to be in your university. So the pre-meds and the medical students of today are tomorrow's doctors. And so what
Mm-hmm,
I want to do is really fill them, right? Really give them the tools, hand them, give it to them in their hands so that they can grow and they can grow successfully and they can make healthcare a better place. And it starts with connecting with the doctors that are actually practicing today, right?
mm-hmm,
Um, I think that we're really siloed when we think about the medical students, for example, that are just surrounded by their system, right? They're just
mm-hmm,
surrounded by their peers, and they
mm-hmm,
don't really get any of the input from someone else, maybe that's physically somewhere else in the States. I think
mm-hmm,
that it adds so much more to connect somebody that's studying to be in medicine with
mm-hmm,
maybe someone that they want to emulate or they want to work with or they want to be mentored by. And
mm-hmm,
that's what I hope to do with SoMe Docs. First, by building out that doctor directory, which I have done over the past few years and is still actively being filled. But then next, to fill a student directory and then to sort of mesh them together and pair up the students with the doctors and to really help both to mentor
mm-hmm,
and to teach
mm-hmm,
and to figure out like what's broken in healthcare and how
mm-hmm.
can we fix it together.
Absolutely. And then to mention, I'll have to tell Bryce what great shout outs we're giving him. But, I just published my episode with him, I think yesterday, where I recorded him. And he even speaks to like he had a good program, as far as, med school, but they weren't talking about these things. And when he found himself really struggling, he said if anyone above him would have said, look, I've been there, or just shared their own story of struggle, then he wouldn't have felt like he was the only one struggling in the world. So it's so important to share stories. So if you, and I think some programs are doing a better job. I think he shared this in the podcast than others. So some might be more directly addressing these issues. So if you have this directory, then if he had been able to connect with, other students around the country that were maybe in a program addressing these things, or he might have just heard their stories. But I think especially if it's other people, and everybody's walking around, acting like they have to be fine, that you can be maybe more honest and open when it's not your peers and not your program.
Well, to speak to that, so there's already, just off the top of my head, two ways that he could have used the site. So where it comes to the directories, we have filters where you can niche down your search. And so he could have picked the burnout section to see which doctors in the directory deal with burnout. That's one. But the second thing is that there's also directories that are called Beyond Exam Room, which is sort of like the side ventures of doctors. And one of those is communities. And there are many communities that doctors can now join, and students, etc., where it's really niche down depending on interest. And so if somebody is looking for burnout, help, then they could ideally join a community that's listed there. Just as if somebody is looking to really up their entrepreneurship skills, there are communities that help with specifically entrepreneurship, and they could kind of, join that community. It's just that we don't know what communities exist. And
Right.
so that's again where SoMeDocs is coming to the rescue and forming these directories that are so neatly organized and can be niched down through filters, so that the public, the person who's looking for something specific, can find exactly what they need, and hopefully their needs are then met.
Right. No, I think that's great because, of course, connectivity is just so important. And there are still, I think, many doctors who do feel siloed in their
Yeah.
own healthcare systems that just don't know that all of this is out there.
Well, and that's the key here, is when you say in their healthcare systems and they're siloed. For me, I recognized this years ago, that when I was working for a system, I was not only representing them, but like my
Mhm.
entire professional being was them. Um,
Mhm.
and every piece of marketing that was put out there was theirs. And
Right.
at the end of the day, we really need to understand that we need to bring autonomy back. The doctor's an individual, right? The doctor's an individual that makes the system what it is. The doctor's
Mhm.
the individual that makes the system shine.
Right.
So why not build presence online of your own, yourself, without the system? And while you're working for the system, great, they can use the different followers that you've built, etc. But when you move from that system to another system, your followers move with you, right? And you
Right.
sort of can still shine, and you don't have to start from scratch. And
Mhm.
so that's a key in what I'm doing with SoMeDocs, is the mission is actually to promote autonomy in medicine, so that, for example, when a doctor leaves one big system and goes somewhere else to practice, the patients don't have to be kept behind going, where did that doctor go? They know
Yeah, right.
exactly
That
where the
would be
doctor went.
so huge, right? Because now, like, they aren't supposedly allowed to say, and
Exactly.
that's terrible.
Right.
So, do you, as we're winding down our conversation, do you have any suggestions for doctors? So, say they haven't learned about all this stuff yet, and they think, a lot of doctors were walking around saying, "All I know how to do is be a doctor," right before they knew about all these things in entrepreneurship. And so they're spending all their days and then their nights like being a doctor, but they're curious about like SoMeDoc, just from this conversation today, right? Or what it has to offer. Like what do you suggest as a first step for a doctor's like, hey, well, maybe there's something out there for me.
Right. So the first step is to visit doctorsonsocialmedia.com and to subscribe. And you don't actually have to be a doctor for that. You could get all our resources that way. If you are a doctor, the next step is to become a member. And again, you can become a member for if you're a US practicing doctor for free, as long as you have an NPI number. You could certainly come in at a higher level if you want those additional perks that you get. And that is just the initial way of working with us. There's so many things we're doing. You can, you know, fluff up your resume with being a speaker. You can make passive income through our virtual conferences. You can create podcasts with us. You can get your writing out there. You can recycle a lot of your content. You can have us increase your visibility. And again, there's just so many things that you can do there. But step one is subscribing, and step two is becoming a member if you're a doctor.
I think that's great. And even just going to your site and seeing all the doctors on there, right? That would be inspirational itself, because there's all kinds of doctors on there, right?
Yeah, they have incredible taglines and they're all different. They're doing
Mhm,
different things, and you can play around with the filters. And again,
mhm,
you can go into our content section and be entertained by our series. We have Samuel Shem's from the House of God with 2
mhm.
series and maybe a third coming. And we have so many different series to watch and podcasts to listen to, and magazine articles to read, that the possibilities really are becoming endless.
Well, that's terrific. So do you have also any top tips for colleagues, from seasoned physicians to medical students, or even those considering med school?
I have a lot of tips. I think that for this particular show, also considering that I'm sick and my mind's a little bit in a fog,
Sure.
um, my tip would be to really explore the world, the online world. And as much as I dislike social media is here and it's here to stay. So learn to leverage it for whatever your endpoint goal is, and learn to do it in a clever way. And if you can't do that alone, then get together with people that do understand it, like me, like the people on SoMeDocs, so that we can give you guidance and that you can start really maximizing your visibility and growing, and reaching your endpoint goals.
Sure. So if how can our listeners get in touch with you, and if they had a specific question about that, right? Like how would they, because you would answer their question, right? How to move forward with this. So how can they reach out to you?
Well, they can always email somedocs@somedocs.com. And they can, on social media, across social media, I'm at Dr. Corriel, DrCorriel. And then you can always tag SoMeDocs, SOMEDOCS. And you can ask a question, and we can answer it. So again, either the email, if it's a private question, or if it's a public question that you want everyone to see, you can tag us and we would be happy to hop on and answer that question.
Okay, well, that's terrific. So thank you again for being my guest today. Was there any final
Ooh.
words that you had to share? You shared a lot.
I want to say thank you so much. It's been really fun watching you grow and support doctors. It's so refreshing to see people support our cause. And I think it's when patients and healthcare workers get together and really amplify each other's voices, that's when we can really bring about change. So gratitude to you.
Well, thank you 100%. And other doctors have said it's not until patients start making a ruckus that, things are going to change
Right.
as well. So it's very
Absolutely.
important. So yeah, well, and thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's
Thank you.
fantastic.
Thank you
And
so
I'm
much.
so happy to spotlight you today.
I appreciate that so much.
Sure. So in
Thank you.
closing, to move the needle in healthcare, we all need to raise our voices, and we all need to care about each other. We already know that doctors need to care about patients. Patients need to care about doctors too. So stand up, doctors, and let's stand up for doctors.
Yay.